Greetings and welcome back to the Casual Wargamer. This is sort of a response video to one put out earlier today by Auspex Tactics, where he talks about what he claims are the 5 Warhammer 40k rules and things that he's glad are gone. And it's an interesting video, but I don't actually think he touches on the important things which have gone. And I thought I will do this. Always looking for new topics to cover and get your thoughts. So these are my, what's it going to be, 5 things which I'm pleased are gone. Number 1, templates and scatter dice. For those of you who weren't around for templates and scatter dice, this was what was used pretty much everything before 8th edition. They were templates, literally. There was a flamer template, which was an extended like teardrop shape, and 2 circular markers, small and large, for blast templates. And the idea was that you would fire weapons that were a flamer template, like a flamer, or certain psychic attacks, and you'd put it down with the short end touching the base of the psyker or the flamer dude, and you'd point this out. Some things like the, I think it was the Hellhound, could actually project this template rather than it being fired directly from the model. And any enemy models under it was the number of models that were hit, auto hit. And with the templates, again, you had the same thing. These are round discs. You would hold it over where your target was. At one point, you could just put it anywhere. And then I think 6th or 7th edition, they made it so you had to put like the central hole over a model. These were a pain in the bum. Let's just be honest here. They really were. And the reasons why I'm glad they're gone is that, one, they were always awkward to place, especially if the unit you were firing at was in terrain, especially a ruin, where you can't properly place these markers, especially if you were aiming at something on an upper level. You would also have situations where you would go, right, this is here, it's got these 3 guys, and your opponent would look at it and go, no, this guy's only a fraction. You're not got him. He's just out. And there would be all manner of arguments over how many models were under a template. And sometimes you would even get a point where you'd get a neutral third person to come in, and whoever they sided with would not be, would be happy. The other one was like, that's not right. You're wrong. And it caused arguments. Maybe not massive arguments, but it caused arguments which affected the game and slowed down the game. And then you also had wobbly hand syndrome, where you're trying to hold it steady while someone's looking and it's shifting slightly. Couple this with the flamer template, with the scatter dice, because blast templates scattered. You had this little dice. I haven't got mine to hand, but I still keep mine for 10th edition, because 2 sides would have a hit icon, and the other 4 sides were arrows. I use it in 10th edition for putting an arrow pointing at, well, it's the arrow of shame for those units which fail their battle shock tests. They get the arrow of shame. But you would roll the scatter dice along with 2d6. If it hit, it stayed where you put the template. Otherwise, it moved in the direction of the arrow, 2d6 minus your ballistic skill in inches. So the better a shot you were, the less distance it travelled. The problem was, again, shaky hand syndrome. You try to hold it there, and then you've got to agree exactly which direction the arrow is pointing. And no 2 players ever agreed on it. It was a terrible sort of mechanic. Warhammer Fantasy used it as well for catapults and trebuchets and things like that. And it didn't work there either. Some people look back and they go, oh, we should have templates back instead of this auto number of shot hits. But if they played through those earlier editions, I think generally they are looking at it through rose-tinted glasses. None of us like change, and a lot of people see that as how 40k used to be, but it was a bad idea. It caused more arguments than anything else. The next thing, number 2, can you guess what it is? Slow rolling. This changed in the June update recently, and this was it used to irritate the nine hells out of me when people would pull stuff like this. So normally, if you're shooting at a unit of 5 Marines, say, and you get 6 hits, you just roll the dice and you don't worry about it. But sometimes there comes a point where you need to know whether, especially if there's a character or a special weapon in that squad, and you need to know whether that model's dead or not. What I don't, on top of my head, and I was trying to think about this earlier today, I can't remember whether it was ever actually a case of Games Workshop said you slow rolled for this, or whether it was tournament organisers who went, this is what we need to do, and it kind of spread through the community. But they would get you to roll, if you wanted to do a command reroll, you would have to roll so many, and then you'd have to roll the ones you might want to CP reroll separately, because for some strange reason they had this idea that you would have knowledge, foreknowledge of what was going on. My argument is, don't bother with that. Just roll the dice, and if you need to re-roll one of them, re-roll it, which is what you can do now with the June update. Fix this and said you can fast roll everything. They will always argue that it makes a difference. It's giving you foreknowledge of the dice rolls, the saves, the whatevers. It doesn't matter. People need to realise it's a game. Just get it going, play it. It's meant to be fun. We're not meant to be quibbling over silly little things like that. I'm glad that's gone. In fact, the day before they dropped the June update, I was discussing this with a friend of mine, and he was trying to put across that point, and I was trying to say how bad it was. And then the next day, I went back and I'm like, see, they listened, they changed it. Number 3 was armor facings. Oh, my computer's playing up. Armor facings. Vehicles used to have armor values, not armor facings, sorry, armor values. Prior to 8th edition, vehicles used to have armor value rather than toughness. And this meant that something like a Land Raider was armor value 14 all round. Something like a Leman Russ might be 13 at the front, 12 at the sides, and 10 at the rear. Most transports were like similar to that, but most vehicles were 10 at the rear. And the idea was that instead of rolling against on the toughness chart, if you attempted to wound the vehicle, you had to roll a d6 plus the strength of the weapon, and you had to at least equal, if not exceed, the armor value of the facing that was the majority in front of you. And these were done in like these, 45-degree angles. 45-degree angles, is that right? 90-degree angles. Yeah, brain not working. If you managed to equal, you got a glancing hit, which had one effect. If you got a greater than the AV, you had a penetrating hit, which was more likely to blow the vehicle up. The problem with this was it forced people to take loads of heavy weapons, because bolters aren't going to do so all. The only way they worked is if you got behind a vehicle and you rolled 6s to wound. And if you're pointing the rear end of your tank at the enemy, you're doing something wrong. But it basically meant that you could get things like, as they were back then, Imperial Guard would take tank regiments or a good few tanks, and they would make sure they bumped off anything you had that could deal with their armor values. And it didn't make for a very good game. The person on the other side would often feel quite despondent. I can't do anything about a vehicle list. I played many games myself where I had that exact problem. If I had a Devastator squad or something with multi-melters or las cannons, my opponent would purposefully target them straight off the bat to deny me any chance of being able to do anything. And it's not good gameplay. Again, like I said about scatter dice and templates, the problem is people look back at these things with rose-tinted glasses and they think it was a good idea. Similarly, You know what I mean. Number 4 would be weapon facings on vehicles. So just as you had the arcs for armor value, vehicles would have these. You would use the same thing for firing arcs. So if you had, say, a Leman Russ with a heavy bolter at the front, it had that arc at the front. The sponsons quite often just straight down the sides. They can never fire directly in front, but they had that sort of half circle around it. And if you had something classed as a turret weapon, it could fire all the way around. It's actually a lot easier the way they do it now. Again, I know some people like it, but I think it is better to just say, it fires, your vehicle fires. There are a couple I think are a bit odd. In normal respects, you can say something like a Storm Talon gunship, shoot something behind it because it's shooting that as it flies to its current position. You can put that cinematically. But there are some things like, I'm trying to think of the name of it, is it the Shadow Sword? The big super heavy Baneblade equivalent, where the volcano cannon on the front is literally fixed. It's bolted in place. It cannot move. And yet that can fire backwards. It doesn't always make sense. But much like armor values, weapon facings never really added anything. I don't think they add a sense of tactical skill. It's just annoying. I think the way Games Workshop have made this anything can fire anywhere, while it's not particularly immersive, perhaps, it speeds the game up. It just makes it easier. Number 5, and this is one that I have spoken about many, many times on my videos before. I'm going to do it this once more, and I will probably end up doing it again simply because how much it used to irritate me. And that is AP on weapons being what they are. So an AP3 weapon denied everything a save unless it was a Terminator with a 2-up save or something with an invulnerable. It just meant everybody took AP3 weapons, because once you get through a Space Marine, you're going through everybody. It spoilt Space Marines. It made them bad. It made them crap for a very, very long time. That's now gone. The modifier, which goes back to the days of the Rogue Trader, is a much better way of doing it. Much better. And lastly, number 6, and this is a more of a niggle one for me, but it still used to irritate the 9 hells out of me. There were psychic powers in previous editions, which were just awkward. They were just annoying and frustrating for the person on the other end. I'm going to pick on 2 specifically because they're ones that I used to face a lot. Psychic powers before the current incarnation of the game, you didn't just have it as a shooting attack or an inbuilt blanket effect. You had to roll on a chart, or if you were happy with it with your opponent, you could just pick. But you had specific powers. And there's 2 that I'm going to pick on. One was Eldar, and one was Chaos Space Marines. Eldar had this one, I can't remember what it was called, Storm of something. And basically, if they passed their psychic test, they could target a vehicle and they could pivot it on the spot in any direction. So your tank that's going across the table suddenly got spun round to that armor value of 10 that we were talking about is suddenly facing everything. Those lance weapons, your shuriken catapults that are going to wound on 6s, everything can now hit that armor value, and it just made it so much easier for your opponent to just take out tanks. It's one of the reasons why Eldar were horribly broken, in my opinion. Their psychic powers were far too good, and this was one of them. They were very... I can't think of the word. But if you were playing vehicles and you were relying on vehicles, you were playing something like a tank regiment army, or maybe that's the only thing you've got that was particularly good, your Predators or whatever, this just used to be frustrating as all hell. The real problem for me was Chaos Space Marines. We have a couple of people who used to play CSM back then, and there was a psychic power that basically allowed them to pick a model in a unit, an infantry model, or a character, And if they pass that test, that model became a Chaos spawn, as providing the CSM player had a spawn model to put on the table, and it would basically appear either in that spot. I think it changed over a couple of editions. It either had to appear like an inch away, or it stayed where it was, and it was in what we call engagement range now. But basically, as long as they had spawn models, they could keep turning infantry models into spawn. I had it quite a few occasions, and it basically then locked that unit in. A lot of people normally target. If you had a character or a squad leader, normally they would pick that. But it was always, again, it took a lot of the fun out of the game when you've got psychic abilities that basically not broke the game so much, but they're almost like what we would call gotchas. It's like, you know, they can do it. It's part of the codex. It's part of the rules. You know what it is. They're not just pulling it out of their hat. But when it happens, you just turn around and go, what's the point? Those are my rules that I am glad are gone. Templates. Damn, that was a breath of fresh air when they went. Armor values and weapon facings, beautiful. Getting rid of AP to put it back to a modifier. You know, all of these are praise the Emperor sort of time. What are your thoughts? Do you agree, disagree? What are the ones that you miss? And in fact, what are the ones you would like to see come back? Let me know down in the comments down below. Give me a nice thumbs up. Really appreciate it. And hit the subscribe button as it helps grow the channel. And we're coming up to, well, we're just over a year actually, thinking about it with the channel. I've got a lot more subscribers than I thought, but we can certainly do with growing that channel. So please share the video as well. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the comments down below. Take care. Good gaming.